will not need any introduction to Shereya. She has presented a number of times over the last couple of years. So Shereya describes herself as a mechanical engineer by trade, by degree, but a reliability engineer by good luck. She loves the passion of reliability principles and introducing digital tools to make sure that reliability principles are enabled through the business. She says she lives and breathes reliability, using reliability principles in her day-to-day life, and even more so as she's become a new mum over the last couple of years. As a new mum, she uses root cause analysis to decipher her little one's needs, and she uses key metrics like mean time between feeds, MTBF, collecting a range of data that has helped her with her son and making some decisions, data-driven decisions. Outside of work, she is a bridal henna artist and really enjoys this art form. Henna can take up to 7 hours to do at times, and she enjoys channeling her creative side there. So without further ado, welcome to the stage, Shereya.
I'm going to kick off with a story. So the past 2 years, I have realised there are many similarities with motherhood and reliability engineering. So my first year, as Leanne mentioned, I used root cause analysis. I calculated metrics such as mean time between feeds, and I was collecting a whole host of data on my little and most prized asset. In my second year of motherhood, I have learnt all about ECA, Equipment Criticality Analysis. And this car is not any car. It is the car, the most critical asset in my household right now. Without it, we cannot operate, and it causes maximum disruption to our operations. So I did what many parents do. I bought a spare. I actually bought two spares of the same car. And while doing this, I really realised how practical ECA was and how important it was for effective decision making. So whether you are looking after assets in organisations or your own assets at home, really understanding what is important and the most critical, and equally what is least critical, is important and fundamental to have smooth and effective operations. Today, I'm going to be diving into how Woodside established an ECA program that delivered 7-figure savings and how you can apply these steps in your organisation. So starting off strong with why, any reliability initiative that you take must deliver value to your business. So fundamentally, it must impact profit or cost in a positive way. And the different ways that we can, as reliability engineers and maintenance engineers who work on operating assets, we can actually influence this by a number of different factors. So if we look at optimising RAU, optimising our expenditure, maximising production, minimising downtime, etc., while always making sure that we manage our risks and safety, we can actually influence the business's revenue. Now, a common thread between all of this and a key enabler is ECA. So ECA helps us maximise revenue because it allows us to focus on what matters the most. We can identify a high impact equipment on safety, on production, on our business objectives and strategic objectives. It helps with safety and emissions because we can use those metrics as key parameters when we assess ECA against. To optimise reliability, availability, utilisation, and reduce our downtime, well, ECA allows us to tailor our maintenance strategies to the criticality of each of these equipment. And then optimising OPEX, essentially reducing costs for the business. By focusing on critical assets, we can really avoid any unnecessary expenditure on non-critical equipment. So as you can see, ECA is a key enabler and something that a lot of businesses look into. Now, what is ECA? Fundamentally, it really is just a methodology to understand the least to the most important equipment for your business. So it's very business tailored. At Woodside, we had historically used an ABC kind of traffic light indicator system. And equipment that fell into A category was really equipment where the primary function was to prevent any major accident or major environmental event. So think of a fire water pump, shutdown valve, those type of things. And category B was anything which had a primary function for production. So anything that had an impact on our production. Think of it as a process pump. Now, category C really was equipment that didn't really fall into category A or B, which fell into C. Now, the big issue we had was the majority of our equipment actually fell into A and B, which meant that we couldn't distinguish 80% of our equipment against each other. And they go to say, if everything's important, well, nothing really is. So this was a big challenge, and this is why we embarked on our ECA journey. Our ECA initiative was quite a large-scale, complex program, but fundamentally, there was 5 key steps that we followed that I'll share in a bit more detail. The first step, and one of the most important steps, is really deciding and initiating the project. So that is defining clear goals for the business, gaining stakeholder approval, support, clearly defining scope, and attaining budget. So these are key things that you really need to even get the project going on in the first place. The second step of the process is to develop the ECA framework. So that is what parameters you're going to use to evaluate your equipment in your business. Step 3 is to analyze and score. So this is the data collection piece, evaluating and scoring and validating your outputs. Step 4, one of the most important parts of this process, is really linking it back to why you started this in the first place. So that's value extraction, using ECA to drive some change in your business. And then step 5 is the continuous improvement piece. So keeping ECA live, it is dynamic as organisation changes. So keeping it live so it still delivers value for your business. So let's jump in a bit more detail. Starting off with step 1, this was all about clearly defining your objectives. At Woodside, we had 3 key things that we were looking for. And the first being we really needed to have clear identification of our operation and maintenance focus areas. Secondly, we really needed to optimise our OPEX. And third, we really needed to move towards a more reliability-focused maintenance activities on our assets. So these were our key drivers. From there, this was what our resource requirements actually looked like. So to conduct this ECA, we had 2 reliability engineers on this full-time. We engaged with discipline engineers and data science when it came to step 3, around analysing and scoring our ECA. For step 4, around value extraction, we really pulled on our engineering and maintenance teams for this. And we also used our SAP specialists as well, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail. And finally, when it came to scope, this is how we approached it. So we took an agile methodology. So we piloted ECA on a very small subset of equipment. This was a way to test ECA rapidly. From there, we extended it to another asset. And then depending on the value we extracted, the plan was to implement across the board to all of our equipment. And at the time, we had over 200,000 equipment. So starting with step 2, developing our framework. This is all about assessing the essential parameters that are going to give us a criticality score. We engaged with DuPont and we landed on a risk-based ECA approach. This was looking at really the consequence or failure of our equipment times the probability. We had 4 broad categories that we assessed our consequence against. So under business impact, We looked at things like what is the production impact if our equipment fails, and customer impact, so looking at any like contract obligations as well if it fails. When we look at strategic, this was really looking at our growth opportunities and the impact failure would cause on that. And then we looked at a lot of key equipment data, so such as mean time to repair, replacement cost, utilization, redundancies. And then when it came to HSC, we were looking at the health and safety impact, environment, and regulatory impact. So these are examples of the actual parameters that we use for our ECA program. And then probability was our mean time between failure for that equipment. From here, we needed to score our parameters. So for example, when we looked at production impact, this was per product, we came up with some banding around how we would score that impact relative to different products. And similarly, for reliability value, we looked at failure rate and what that scoring would look like. And this took some time to really refine. From here, we analysed our equipment. For each parameter, each category that we had, the high-level category, we had a weighted score that was provided within that category. And across all 4 categories, the highest score was taken and then multiplied by a probability, the mean time to failure, which gave us, in this example, 56. And this was done across our pilot equipment. From there, we took those raw values that you see on the right-hand side and we bucket them into 5 different criticality rankings, such as super high critical all the way to non-critical equipment. Now, this was done line by line, each equipment at a time. So we really faced our biggest challenge, and that was how are we going to rapidly scale this for 200 plus equipment? Doing this manually was very tedious and actually pulled upon a lot of resources. So we had to pivot. We had to think about the problem differently. Either we stop, or we reduce our scope, or we really think about it completely differently. What we found was that a lot of the parameters that I talked about were coming from some sort of data source. Not all of them, but majority were. And we could apply some sort of rule sets and logic to hopefully extract those parameter values that we were doing manually. So our solution was to test out automated equipment criticality analysis. Now, the big business benefit was that we could push through a lot of our equipment through ECA, but moreover, if we connected to our systems live, it meant that our ECA would be dynamic. So as things change, our ECA values could change. So this was really powerful. So this is where we pivoted down the auto ECA path. To do auto and dynamic ECA, we first had to clearly identify and extract our data. So this meant mapping out our parameters that we initially assessed our ECA on to the relevant data sources. In many of the cases, there was multiple areas and multiple data sources that this data was coming from, which meant there was a lot of effort in actually establishing rule sets and criteria and norms. So this is an example of replacement costs. There's a bunch of different places where we can get that data, such as SAP system, norms, also applying generic rule sets across the board for object types, sizing, make and models, etc. So there was a lot of work that was done in setting up rule sets. Everything that we were doing manually, essentially. From there, we coded this up in Python, and we got a script to run and calculate our ECA scores. From there, we validated our outputs. So by doing a manual ECA pilot program, this was an awesome way to use that data and actually see what our automated ECA was giving us. And that was an opportunity for us to refine our outputs as well and our inputs. And then lastly, we put a criticality categorization on it. So what you're seeing there is pretty much all the criticality scores, and then we put a distribution on them that was most appropriate. This way we don't end up with 80% of our equipment in high criticality. The next piece was all around the data management. So storing your ECA outputs. For us, we stored these in our data lake, in our Snowflake, which meant we could actually pull upon this readily. And then keeping ECA live, so connecting to that data source and really the entire data management piece around how do we update, and when something does change, how do we keep that history? So the whole data piece of this puzzle. Now we move on to step 4, which is my favorite step, and that's the value extraction. So how do we use ECA to actually achieve some business outcomes? Now, if we look at the equipment that fell into the non-critical and low critical, we took a lens of cost saving. So we wanted to justify that maintenance in, making sure that it actually addressed credible failure modes. Either we wanted to remove it or even extend it based on the data that we had. We wanted to minimize any sort of monitoring efforts if not necessary, and simplify our maintenance, and also a sparing. So that's the lens we took when it came to the low criticality bucket. For the medium critical equipment, the lens was all around optimization. So using preventative maintenance optimization, PMO, to optimize strategies, looking at condition-based or RCM, optimizing spares, and also the reliability improvements on reoccurring issues. And then for the final bucket, around anything that was in the super high or high critical, the mindset was to reduce failure impact from this. So looking at optimizing a spare part inventory, reducing mean time between failure, mean time to repair, focusing on RCM, RCAs as well to understand failure modes, etc. So that's what we did with our bucketing. Further to that, we actually overlaid ECA outputs onto other different data source sets. So one of the interesting ones that we looked at was upcoming maintenance, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot of people. You tend to have more maintenance that you can actually do with your resources. So overlaying ECA on our corrective work and our reoccurring work and seeing what that split looked like meant that we could really prioritize our scheduling, defer work, delete work, and optimize really work execution. Further, we overlaid this on our bad actors. So we looked at the last 5 years of bad actors and where the criticality lied, which meant that we could really do targeted reliability improvement programs on those equipment. In terms of our tangible outcomes doing ECA, automated ECA, linking it back to why we started the project in the first place, we really needed to identify operation and maintenance focus areas. So ECA enabled us to prioritize our maintenance so we could review our upcoming work, and the outcome was that we actually achieved the allocated hours, so the work to the allocated hours that we had. We stored our ECA against our EAM system, so our SAP system, so that maintenance planners and resource estimators could actually drive work prioritization. And this was further embedded into tools as well in the business. And then when it came to bad actor, we could see where we needed to target our resources. In terms of OPEX and also reliability-focused maintenance activities on our asset, we had a focus on reviewing those low critical equipment and looking at the strategies and really justifying any of the maintenance that we were doing on low critical equipment. We reviewed high critical equipment that was not related to performance standards, so where we could optimize maintenance strategies. And we also embedded ECA into other digital tools where we were already looking at strategy optimization. And the outcome of this was that we achieved 7-figure maintenance savings by utilizing ECA. The last step of the process is to review and improve the continuous improvement piece. And for us, luckily, this was captured by dynamic ECA. So as things change, so could our ECA parameters and ECA scoring. Now, going through the ECA process end to end, there was a number of key lessons that I learned, and I'd love to share it with anyone that might be embarking on the ECA journey or is already on it. The first one is around utilising the agile methodology. So for us, doing a pilot program on a handful of equipment and rapidly showing, working through the process and showing benefit meant that we could scale and we could pivot when we faced challenges. So that was a key enabler for us. Second was to consider automated dynamic ECA in your front-end planning. So if you're considering going down this path, potentially think about how you could automate it at the beginning. This might change your parameters. Number 3 is a really interesting point, and it's about accuracy, the balance between accuracy and the actual impact on final outcomes. As I had mentioned, that not all our parameters could be automated, and we hit about 80%. But it was all about how gaining, the 90 or the 90% accuracy versus the 80 is actually going to impact our final outcome that we did. So it's a balance here, and taking a pragmatic approach. 4 is a role around continuity. So if you deliver a sustainable solution in your business, then you can almost guarantee that you could have continuity of your reliability initiatives for long-lasting impact. So that's really key as well. And the last one is that ECA really is a journey. We're still on that journey as things change, such as acquiring new assets, retirement, changes in data sources, changes in our EAM system. All of those things impact your ECA. So that is a journey that we're still progressing through. In summary, these were the 5 key steps that we used to deliver automated dynamic ECA in an organisation, which delivers 7-figure savings at Woodside. Personally, I'm still on the dynamic ECA route because my little one's most critical asset is now this aeroplane and not the 3 identical cars that I bought him. So my ECA journey continues. And with that, I would love to welcome some questions. Is there any questions from the audience? We've got one at the front. Yeah.
G'day. Malcolm A from Water Corporation. I noticed one of the parameters you've got there is value, and we have a lot of stuff. And sometimes that value is not tangible from a sense of an overall perspective. Like, it's hard to see if the thing's $3,000 to replace and you have a lot of those. How did you reconcile or get that value back as a key driver?
So are you talking about the value to the business?
Yes.
Yep. So when we initially showed, I'll just try and go back to sorry. Won't let me go back. AV team. I'll just go back a few slides, please. Go back. So when we started off, and I guess I emphasised that the first step was really why are you doing it? For us, a big part of it was the OPEX. And I guess when it comes to OPEX, that is something that you can actually evaluate. But there was also, with ECA, as you saw, there was efficiency gains as well, which helped us prioritise our maintenance better, those type of things. So really our key driver was OPEX, which is what drove us to do ECA in the first place. And the other drivers, even though it's hard to actually calculate what that looks like, there was still real benefit of doing it. Any other questions?
Hey, Shereya, Danny. Shereya already knows me, so that's a great presentation. Really enjoyed it. Loved your comment around scalability and how important that was in your project to make sure that you could get through it faster. Sounds a bit like to me that you were trying to slow down to speed up. We often find that when we do need to slow down to eventually speed up, sometimes we're met with a bit of resistance in the organisation because they don't like that word slow. Did that happen to you at all in this project, and how did you overcome it if it did?
Yeah, definitely. So the whole, I guess, agile is to do things fast, really get something for the business really fast and show value. So with our pilot program, we made sure that we could do that fast and we could actually figure out exactly what we needed in terms of our parameters and where we would get it from. But 100%, when it came to automating, that was not easy. There's a lot of rule sets that had to go in there, and we had to slow down. We had to make it we had to make it right so that our final outcome would be as accurate as possible. So that was a real big communication piece with the business, that we can achieve this manually, but it's going to take us a really long amount of time. Or we pivot, spend time, really get our rule sets and data sources all correct, or as accurate as possible. And that means we can scale fast. So I think it was really a balance of like showing what we could have done, we could do, showing that was a big challenge there, slowing down, and the business actually supporting that to be able to rapidly scale to our equipment. Good question. Anyone else?
Anthony Dodd, Alcoa. Did you release the criticality before moving on? Was that a whole point? And was it released to operations and like breakdown crews? Did they agree with the criticality?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our pilot program, it was we took a tailored approach, only took a couple of equipment types, and there was about 4,000 of them. When we finished doing our criticality assessments, we did have engineer and maintenance involved in terms of actually ranking our equipment and helping with that process of how we would rank it and what that scoring looked like. And there was a big piece around actually validating those outputs. So we had workshops with maintenance, operations, engineering to actually sense check what was coming out, and then also how we would bin it in the end. So there was a lot of effort involved in actually making sure what we were doing meant something at the end. Yeah, and then could drive and influence processes.
Is it on? Yeah. I think being an engineer, I'd be able to work a mic. Question. So at our site, and I think probably other sites too, most of our people are just fighting fires constantly. People have got other priorities. I saw that you had 2 reliability engineers on there, plus a whole bunch of SMEs helping you out with this. How did you convince the business to give you that resource to do it?
Really good question, and like I mentioned, was like the key for the project. And as you know, when I started my presentation, it was the why, and that's fundamentally what it comes down to. So your business really needs to understand the why, and that really comes down to engineers, reliability engineers and leaders to be able to communicate why. So if we can communicate that, then hopefully we can get the resources for programs like these initiatives. But yeah, I can't emphasize more that the why is so critical when it comes to these initiatives. And also piloting, doing something very quick to show business value actually gets buy-in as well. So sometimes that's also another way. Like just getting some leadership support, doing something and then showing the value can actually help you get a bigger scope in your project. Yeah. Time check. How much time do we have? Some time? 5 minutes? Cool.
Hello, I'm Stefan Dupre from Covalent Lithium. I was wondering, with the automation of the input data, would you be able to tell us sort of what programs were feeding into the system? And secondly, because it's automated, how often is that being validated and I guess monitored so you can ensure the ECA is consistently correct as it produces new data?
Yeah, 100%. I'll go back to the slide. So there was a range, because we had quite a lot of parameters. So there's a range of different data sources. Let me just get it up so I don't have to do it from memory. Give me a sec. So work through it. One more slide, I think. No more. So there was a range of sources, so such as when it came to HSC, we have our like MOC system where we used to actually put in risks for asset failure. When it comes to production impact, we have a production system which allocates production impact from previous events to equipment. Mean time between failure was an interesting one. We actually have a survivability model that we've generated and maintained inside Woodside, so we could actually understand for different object types and groups of objects what that failure looked like, the time between failure. Mean time to repair can come from a lot of different places, so we have our own RAM models that we utilize for MTTR. You can use a reader, so actual publicly available data for oil and gas industries. So yeah, there was a whole host. There was certain parameters that I did mention that were not automatable, so things like actually looking at our PNIDs for redundancies, utilization. Those were much trickier to get, and we didn't have that at the time. Things have changed though, but at the time we didn't have those automated. And a key part I did talk about was around that data engineering piece. You know, having an automated program, it is a bit scary because you know, data's going in and things are changing. So there was a lot of effort around actually how we keep ECA live and how we validate those outputs. And it's still a journey we're on, but it was all about having the right people who had access and understood ECA to be able to validate what was coming out of it as well. Yep.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. I'm Rodolfo from Alcoa. In terms of the range of the project, are you in a global position that you actually look at multiple sites, or the initiative came back from one specific site and then went up in the organization? How it was in terms of the range?
Yeah, so at the time, so this was done about 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, our business looked a bit different. We were predominantly an Australia-based business. Most of our assets, we have assets across different sites. But now, moving forward, we actually are international and we've acquired a lot more assets. So that was a point that I did make, that we're on that journey still. This initiative first came about because we had, obviously COVID happened during those 3 years. There was a lot of push around OPEX and optimizing our OPEX. And as you can see, we had a traffic light system that really wasn't giving us the granularity. So it initially came out from a particular asset that was really struggling with meeting their budget. And that's where the pilot program actually started. And when we showed benefit, that's when we moved to our different assets. I think we've got time. One more? Yeah.
Hi there, Jerry from Fortescue. I love the presentation, love everything about this process. Big thing for me is we do a lot of focus on the high criticality assets, always become our big focus. What was, and I'm sorry if I missed it within it, what was the output for anything that was deemed low or very low in that criticality index? What was the business decision to do with those assets?
Yeah, so the lens for anything that was low was the cost saving kind of lens on there. And actually what we really did was we had our engineers, discipline engineers, pretty much viewing those low critical assets on a justify in process. So there was a forced, you need to justify this maintenance that we're doing, which really forced us to think about our failure modes and kind of the reliability fundamentals of why you do what you do on your assets to your equipment. So that was a lens that we took. So we really pushed, you need to justify with a good reasoning why we're doing that. You need to justify the strategy as well. And you also need to justify the time and the frequency that we're doing it. So it was a very data-driven approach around that. We used a lot of historical data to support, you know, the frequencies and the intervals that we were doing our work at. So that was the lens that we took.
Sorry. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Shereya. Fantastic presentation. What a great start to our day today, starting at the start of the process on how we know what equipment to focus on when we're doing our maintenance and engineering. So thank you very much. Please, everyone, join me in a round of applause for Shereya.
Thank you.
a 5-minute break before the next one in here. Otherwise, feel free if you're moving to another room.